I'm Lisa Fletcher for Spotlight on America. It wasn't that long ago that childhood leukemia was considered a death sentence. Now, most kids survive, thanks in large part to federally funded clinical trials that could be in jeopardy if their already dwindling budgets sustain further cuts.
You've probably never heard of COG, the Children's Oncology Group, a small organization of cancer doctors around the world who work together to try to cure childhood cancer, the disease that is the #1 killer of kids under 20.
Since 1975, rates of child cancer have increased by more than 40%.
These are the faces that know it well. Thousands of child cancer patients seek hope in clinical trials through COG.
At any given time, we have somewhere between 70 and 90 clinical trials.
Successes include trials like this one that led to a new immunotherapy for kids that significantly improved disease-free survival. But those successes are fragile, connected to funding that may disappear.
Our ability to function is entirely dependent on federal support.
Dr. Doug Hawkins is chair of the Children's Oncology Group and treats kids with cancer at Seattle Children's Hospital. It's his job to make sure that the largest organization that conducts clinical trials for kids with cancer survives.
If you're dependent on federal funds and suddenly that gets turned off, we're in deep trouble. In fact, it is an existential threat to us.
60% of COG's $45 million annual budget comes from the National Institutes of Health, where news of recent funding slashes is creating new anxiety for COG. Even prior to this year, only 4% of all government cancer research dollars went toward pediatric studies. The rest is for adult cancer.
Why do you need to conduct tests on kids? Isn't cancer cancer, and doesn't just a lower dose do the trick for a child?
We don't worry about 20-year side effects when you're treating a 70 or 80-year-old. We just don't worry. We don't worry about the impact of the growth on a developing organ or body in a fully developed adult. That's just not a relevant issue. It is an issue in a 3-year-old.
I am a beneficiary of a pediatric clinical trial, and I don't know if I would still be here today if that trial had not been funded.
Dr. Robert Dilley was diagnosed with leukemia in 2007 when he was just 18 years old. He agreed to be part of a COG trial, testing a promising new addition to chemotherapy. 20 years later, that trial drug is the backbone of many child cancer treatments.
It is because of the trial that I participated in and other trials testing this drug, it remains a standard treatment decades later, and so has saved countless lives because of that.
Today, cancer-free for nearly 2 decades, Dilley is a physician and researcher at Harvard, treating patients he hopes will have access to the cutting-edge medicine that comes out of clinical trials.
How much concern are you hearing in your circles about the potential for these childhood clinical trials to go away or be drastically cut?
I think there's extreme concern across the board. There's concern that it will go to, from a small amount to now next to nothing.
Back in Seattle, Dr. Hawkins is awaiting final word from the feds on COG's budget.
And that's nerve-wracking for us.
Funds have already been flat for 7 years, despite inflation and rising costs of doing research. He's expecting a 10% cut at best, and at worst, having to make hard choices about how and whether life-saving trials can continue.
It is unacceptable to freeze things. Pediatric cancer is rare, but the impact on those children and their families and their communities is huge. And that's why we can't freeze things in 2025. It's just not acceptable.
We reached out to multiple federal agencies, and so far none has told us how much funding will go to COG or when. For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.